Okay. So I just want to confirm that the meeting is now being recorded and that live stream is on. Can I confirm that's the case? Okay. I have pleasure in opening the council meeting of the 23rd of April 2024 at 6 p.m. and welcome all those in attendance. The City of Vincent would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past and present, and also to acknowledge that as a council we have a role to play in achieving reconciliation and justice for First Nations people. Now, I have got one apology, and the apology is from Councillor Jonathan Hallett tonight, who is still unwell, and I note that everybody else is here. Okay, so I'm now going to turn to public question time, and firstly I'd like to see if there's any indication for anyone that they would wish to address the meeting. Okay, all right then, what you do is please come forward one at a time to the microphone. What you need to do is to say your name and to say the suburb that you reside in. Note that this is being recorded, but if you don't want it to be recorded, then we can turn that off. But no one's going to see you on the live recording. So you're limited to 3 minutes, and I will be interrupting if you go over that time. Okay. So also a summary of your remarks are going to end up in the minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, over to you. 3 minutes.
Right. Well, thank you and good evening, Mayor Zaman and elected members. My name is Caroline Cohen. I live at 20 Gardner Street, East Perth, the Banks Precinct, and I'm addressing item 5.2, the amendment to Municipal Heritage Inventory, and the application by the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage to remove a heritage building. This building has sat there since 1904 when it was probably around that time constructed. There used to be many heritage type Federation style, maybe 1920 houses, and some slightly perhaps from 1960s buildings around Guildford Road, wrapping around into East Parade. And these houses have been demolished over time, starting from about 2008. They are owned by the WA Planning Commission. Main Roads is also involved with this, but this land has been derelict for a number of years now. We had a lot of social problems when these houses were under the landlord, who was the state government. They were not maintained, and we ended up with horrendous social issues. And one of the houses was burnt down. We had a brothel. We had, misbehaviour. And currently, number 40 is experiencing the same sort of behaviour. If you look on your report, which I know you've probably read every one of the 114 pages, this is the government trying to justify and negate their responsibility for this heritage house. They have let it sit there all these years, not secured, not tenanted. Originally, these buildings were tenanted. Affordable housing, which is all very topical at the moment, and they will, and little shops, even a corner shop. This building is in a very sad state now, but the Heritage Act is actually there so that we have a tool to help the state government and the Department of Lands and Heritage. Now, there's a conflict. Planning and heritage don't really go together. So they are now applying to have this house removed because it sits partly in road reserve. But we've waited since we had a meeting here at the City of Vincent 2008 with Hassel Engineering to have a solution for traffic congestion on Guildford Road. This poor house is now going to have to suffer. It was considered to be a very fine example of Queen Anne Federation. It was very beautiful. I remember when I first moved to the area about 30 years ago as a resident in the Banks Precinct. It was a fine house, and the photos are frankly shocking now. The WAPC has been quite remiss in its lack of care and respect for this house. I would plead that you do not allow it to be knocked over. There have to be consequences, and you can read about those, and they're quite expensive. in the Heritage Act of 2017. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have a further speaker?
Good evening, Mayor Zaman, CEO David McLennan and councillors. Leslie Flory, 79 Sass Ave, Mount Hawthorn. I have a 900mm stormwater pipe on my property, which I found. The city say they knew of it, but had no record. It's an active major asset of City of Vincent, which runs through my property to Lake Munga. At the last council meeting on the 19th of March, I asked why the City of Vincent was failing to be transparent and not advising ratepayers and residents of stormwater pipes on their property. Governance, whose framework is transparency and accountability, advised if there is maintenance work required to pipes which run through private property, the city will notify the property owner and undertake the relevant works. My question, does this mean the City of Vincent will not be notifying all affected ratepayers and residents? I want a straightforward yes or no answer. Question, does this mean the City of Vincent will only be notifying residents and ratepayers if maintenance is to be conducted? Straightforward yes or no answer is required. Question, does the City of Vincent follow the WA Ombudsman's guidelines for a formal hearing? Does the City of Vincent follow the WA Ombudsman guidelines for complaint investigation and resolution process? An update on my property. I was emailed at short notice, late afternoon on the 9th of the 4th, advising contractors on my property the following morning to reline the stormwater pipe. The entire pipe was relined in one piece, 34 metres, concealing all pipe segments and joints. This process took 2 days. After 12 months of numerous requests for CCTV footage and photos, I have no current evidence of the pipeline condition prior to the relining. Can you please provide the CCTV footage and photos as per my email correspondence and as per the COV email confirming this would be conducted? Question. GHG Technical Drainage Memorandum Report was in 2022. Since 2022 and to this current day of the 23rd of March 2024, I'd like to know the exact number of properties affected by stormwater pipes running through their property. I will not accept we are still investigating. How many properties to date are affected? Question. Can you please advise the full contracted cost to reline the pipe on my property by All Pipe Technologies? Question, can you please advise why my property was an isolated case to reline the stormwater pipe, where 84 Sass Ave, which has damage and cracks in the pipe as per the CCTV footage and photos in May, relined. Thank you for your time.
Excellent timing. Can I have the next speaker, please?
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. My name is Frances Buchanan. I'm the Manager of National Disability Services here in Western Australia. We own the building and occupy the building at 12 Lindsay Street in Northbridge. A beautiful building it is too. We've had a fair bit of experience with some illegal parking in a lane behind our building, which is the lane that leads to our staff car park. The illegal parking by members of the public leads to our staff being unable to exit the building in the evening. As you can imagine, staff not being able to leave their building or move their cars in the evening does cause a fair bit of emotional distress for them. It is a dead-end lane. We're requesting the council's support to look at what we can do or what the council can do to maybe erect some no parking signs or provide better signage just to inform members of the public that it is a no parking area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Sally Dixon. Excuse my anxiety. I just want to implore the council to consider the preservation of the jacarandas and eucalyptus trees on Guildford Road in the East Parade kind of joint where they're going to be doing a development area, just because they're used by the local population of black cockatoos as habitat and food resources. They're already competing for food resources amongst our cityscape. Perth boasts one of the lowest urban tree canopies in the nation, standing at a mere 16%. Would put this into perspective, a healthy urban canopy is generally deemed to be around 30%, as highlighted in the AECOM report on green infrastructure. Green canopies obviously bring a multitude of benefits, including enhanced real estate values and mitigation of the local temperatures. The protection not only safeguards the habitat of our feathered residents, but also contributes significantly to the wellbeing and sustainability of our urban environment. I recommend that the City of Vincent aligns with other progressive councils such as the City of Wanneroo, Cambridge, Kwinana, Mandurah, Melville, Swan and the Shire of Jarrahdale and Serpentine in actively engaging with initiatives like the Kiel Carnaby's Flying Project. By actively participating in their conservation action plans tailored for urban environments, we can hopefully ensure the long-term protection of not only our black cockatoos, but local biodiversity. And also, while we're at it, some mandatory cat containment laws would be good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have a further speaker?
Mayor, councillors, Robert Bowe, 232 Brisbane Street, Perth, speaking in relation to agenda item 10.4. Well, first of all, I want to thank Matt Dowell for being the catalyst for this endeavour coming together. I've lived on Brisbane Street for about 30 years and I'm concerned that the response to the petition via a officer put together recommendation report has to some extent missed the point. In my opinion, the central safety issue in this section of Brisbane Street between Lake and Palmerston is the dangerously short sight lines, which are a result of a narrow carriageway and conventional curbside parking. And all I really want to say is that currently drivers of vehicles cross or enter the subject section of Brisbane Street with an element of faith, because their view of, say, street length on their right and on the left is usually blocked by a car or an SUV. So that means that cars are nosing to the point where the driver can see, but their nose is out where a cyclist coming by could easily whack it or something like that. And that sort of thing does happen. And if you do park in the street and open your door, you've got to look carefully to make certain that there's room for you to actually open your door and not have a car come by and hit it. So this document has done conventional research and information and data gathering, but it's not addressing the issue. I'm suggesting that the fundamental issue would be addressed by deep embayment of the street parking into the verge so that it improves the sight lines for all users of the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor Zeman and elected councillors. My name is Matt Dow from Brisbane Street, Perth, and I'm here to discuss item number 10.4, Brisbane Street response to petition. Firstly, I'd like to thank Manager of Engineering Luke McGurk for responding to my queries over the past week. We appreciate that there is a commitment from the city to consult residents with regard to short-term, low-cost treatment options to manage traffic speed and volume, along with presenting various options to combat the parking congestion issues that we face. Additionally, it is appreciated that the city has acknowledged community concerns regarding safety and is committed to developing a plan to undertake more substantial treatments over the next 18-month period or sooner should Main Roads allocate funding to this project. Thanks to Luke for approaching Main Roads regarding this. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I would like to emphasise the following points. We currently have approximately 1,500 vehicles per day travelling through this residential-only stretch of road that is only 5.4 metres wide, which is less than the width of a typical double garage. Our stretch of the road narrows significantly compared to the rest of Brisbane Street, which has already been widened and has had traffic calming infrastructure installed, including speed humps. However, the majority of the traffic generated from the commercial activity continues down our stretch, which is much narrower than the rest of Brisbane Street and has had zero traffic calming infrastructure investment. We do need to either see the western bound traffic diverted up the Bulwer or Newcastle streets, or investment in widening the road, plateauing the Lake Street intersection, the installation of speed humps, etc., in order to better manage the flow of traffic and ensure the fundamental safety of residents. This has been a long-standing community concern, and I believe that we need to deal with this sooner rather than later, do it once and do it properly. And given the amount of interest shown by residents regarding this issue, it is essential that the options presented to them in the consultation phase are adequate and address the issues at hand. Thank you again to the councillors for the consideration of this matter.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman and councillors. My name is Mark Fritz. I'm from 92 Zabina Street in East Perth in the Banks precinct. And I'd just like to address agenda item 5.2, the amendment of the heritage list, house and heritage list. So here the question is obviously the question of 40 Guildford Road actually, and the removal of the property there. Now, the consideration to remove the property has got to do with installing a slip lane, which was proposed in about 2008 to facilitate traffic flow from Guildford Road onto East Parade. Now, I've lived in the area there for close to sort of 15 to 16 years, and over this time, about 2012, there'd been additional lanes put in the tunnel, conversion of lanes there to traffic flow there to basically facilitate traffic flow from East Parade so they can get into the tunnel sort of more quickly there actually. From observations that I've seen sort of even today for the last probably couple of months actually, what we see in peak hour is that we see traffic that's backed up basically to the point where the new transport building is there on Transperth building there, which is about some 500 metres. What I've seen from observation, about 80% of the cars are actually going on East Parade, are going down to the tunnel. So for me, I really have to look at the question and say, okay, widening of the road there at East Parade to put in the a slip lane from Guildford Road, basically to facilitate traffic flow and removal of the property on 40 Guildford Road there. Is this all going to result in basically just cars being able to get quickly to Guildford Road to the next bottleneck? So really you have to ask the question, what would actually putting the slip lane really achieve if that's the bottleneck is further down the road? And really, if you look at where the transport hub is, the new building, that's probably only about 300 metres down from the intersection of Guildford Road and East Parade. So really traffic's backed up probably about half a kilometre back. So really, yeah, facilitating traffic flow to get quicker onto East Parade, removal of heritage listed building there. You really have to think, what's it really going to achieve in terms of traffic flow? Also during this time as well, just to, during this time as well, sort of in 2008, it's proposed to put the Ellenbrook line. That was never even a consideration in 2008. So we have other transport means to go from east to the city. The airport line, which was not even considered at the time either. So really the consideration to put in better traffic flow, there's much better public transport options there now. So thank you, councillors and Mayor.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Is anyone else, just confirming, does anyone else wish to speak? Okay. Oh, almost closed it. Okay.
Thank you. My name's Dr. Michael Douglas. I'm speaking again to the Berryman Street agenda item 9.1 this evening on behalf of neighbours in Mount Hawthorn. The council has the unenviable job of balancing divergent and inconsistent interests, including those of the applicant landowner, the local neighbours and the broader community. The community's interest, of course, is always very important, but in this case, it's not the most important interest at stake. Australians love coffee and convenience, which locals already have without this cafe in abundance. The most important interests at stake in this application are those of the landowner and the immediate neighbours. Worth noting that, as I understand it, the landowner wants to develop this property not so they can pull coffees themselves, but to make a finishing housing stock in the process. My clients, in turn, want to maintain the lifestyle they spend a fair bit of money on and to enjoy when they bought properties on a very quiet block away from the business strip. The city staff have valiantly tried to balance those inconsistent interests with a recommendation of 34 quite onerous conditions. The need for those conditions, in my view, demonstrates why this recommendation for approval should be rejected. The parking conditions in particular stand out because they've been changed since your briefing last week, after the city realised that there's a big tree in the middle of a driveway that the applicant had proposed. The result of this change of position is that there's no on-site parking for customers of the cafe, contrary to the requirements of City Policy 7.7.1. You'll recall from the last briefing session too that the city is looking at landscaping the verge across the road from the site. If it goes through with that, there'll be even less parking for this cafe, the product of all of which is that there'll end up being parking at the front of my clients' houses with a concomitant noise and risk to their kids. That in itself, in my view, should see this proposal rejected. As for noise, well, conditions 4.1 and 4.2 concern an acoustic report. A report on how a business might be less noisy provides little comfort in circumstances with the efficacy of any recommendations will fall on compliance, not by the applicant, but by whoever ends up running this cafe business. But ultimately, it's going to fall on the neighbours to continuously whinge to council. A barista earning minimum wage lacks the same incentive as councillors do to ensure compliance with the city's policy on noise. Compliance is an issue affecting all of these proposed conditions. The city should not be given the hospital hand pass for policing compliance with onerous conditions that would be difficult for any business to comply with. The solution, in my view, is not to water down the conditions, but to realise that the fair balancing of interests in this case is impossible if the application is approved. Please prioritise what is fair to the immediate neighbours. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers?
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors, CEO and staff of the City of Vincent. My name's Nathan Ebbs and I speak in opposition to agenda item 9.1, which is the cafe on Berryman Street. It should be noted from the outset that this proposal is for a lessee to operate the cafe. It is a commercial enterprise and any attempt in the proposal to paint this as a small-scale operation catering to the people who attend the park is a work of fiction. The cafe operator will be looking to maximise profits by drawing market share away from the other cafes on Scarborough Beach Road and Anzac Road. This is a simple case of profit over residential amenity. Mount Hawthorn is a very different suburb to that which it was 20 years ago. Now a suburb where residents are investing many millions of dollars on housing, and this council are the custodians of that investment by ensuring that the basis on which people made their investment and will importantly make their investment in the future remains constant where possible. The great attraction of Mount Hawthorn is that the commercial enterprise are located on Scarborough Beach Road and Anzac Road, and the cafe strip feel is a feature of the suburb and one of the reasons my wife and I chose to move our family to Mount Hawthorn. We knew the location we chose for our home was in a purely residential area, close to a park with all the benefits suiting a young family. We assumed from our own inquiries that the residential area would remain the same and the shop front at 5 Berryman Street would be a unique design feature like several other retired shops in the suburb. The City of Vincent planning officers have had an unenviable job and have put forward many applicable conditions if the council was minded to approve the DA and allow the cafe to proceed. Tension between control and approval is obvious to anyone reading the papers for this meeting. We've heard from the urban planners acting for the applicants that they want to relax the conditions, but any alteration to the conditions here tonight will essentially render redundant the recommendation of your planning officers. Their recommendation is predicated on conditions that must apply. The applicants have also mooted al fresco approvals that would change the entire nature of this cafe. Al fresco dining means increased numbers, which means different conditions. This is a Trojan horse application. We heard at the briefing meeting last week that there's a distinction between noise emanating from Menzies Reserve and this cafe. Cafe noise is a different and disruptive noise to those who have to live with it on a daily basis. You have no information before you on actual noise. All you have is a report from the applicant that proffers an opinion about what might happen. In any event, the clear concern about the effect this cafe will have on residents and the residential amenity, which is being addressed by these many conditions, places heavy reliance on either the cafe operators to report non-compliance or residents to do it. As this council well knows, this DA needs to meet the objectives of the resident. It needs to be compatible and complementary, and it's not. Make no mistake, this is a commercial enterprise with one intention: make money for the operator and owner. The decisions to open the cafe and operate this cafe are financial, and if you were to look at the property in question, it may well be because without the cafe, the rental yield of this property would be very poor. Words used in the proposal by the applicant, like microeconomy, further emphasise the commercial aspects of this DA. Please see this proposal for that which it is. The Berryman site is ready for a significant renovation which will continue the increase in housing stocks and overall attraction of Mount Hawthorn.
Okay, can you please wrap up your comments?
Yeah, 1 minute. The public support for this proposed development is from those who will not be directly affected. The direct neighbours to the proposed development have voiced their unequivocal opposition, and those are the residents whose voices should be given priority. This DA is unworkable, disruptive, and puts the needs for a profit business above current or would-be residents of Mount Hawthorn.
Okay, you might
I
need
urge the
to.
council to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have the next speaker, please?
Hi, my name is Bev Whitfield and I live at 76 Federation Street, Mount Hawthorn, about 100 metres from the proposed cafe. I bought my home in toward the end of 1988, and I realise that people spend millions now, but in my time as a teacher, it was still, for me in 1988, very expensive. So it's relevant. When I purchased the home, the suburb was quiet and an older community. And over the period of years, the Mount Hawthorn is now thriving, full of families and children. And the prospect of a cafe for me is fantastic, and I'm here to support it. The primary school is flourishing. There are kids everywhere. There's people out everywhere. And on Menzies Park on a weekend, there are cars everywhere, and there are children and adults playing sport, and also through the week. For me, having a cafe, and it's fine if it's going to be business, of course it's going to be, and I would totally support that. It's about a place to go as well for communities to get together, and where it is, it will be on a smaller scale, and it will be families, it will be people who know each other that tend not to talk that much, but they'll meet at a cafe. Most people love coffee, and coffee brings out chat in people. And I see that our area, yes, we have the high street, yes, we have other places, but Australia is renowned for its cafes and its friendly environments. And after living in England for quite a while, I can say that they hold us in awe, the fact that we have so many cafes. We can have another cafe. It is not going to be, that's not going to be a problem. And one of the reasons why I will never move is because it has everything we want, including the small little corner shops. Piccolo's Corner in West Leederville is an example of a corner cafe that's thriving and loved, I'm sure not by everybody, but most people, because everyone goes there. It's in the middle of housing. It works. It's difficult to park, so you don't go there. So I would just like to finish off by saying, as a resident of Federation Street, very close, I understand the gentleman's worries, but for me, I think nothing's going to change. Cafes close at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. They don't keep going. They don't go on into the evening. And you don't get a lot of people turning up to a cafe at 6 or 7 in the morning. I am absolutely all for it. And I think, in fact, it'll make our properties increase in value rather than the other way. Thank you very much.
Okay, do I have any further speakers?
Sorry, Alex Stoichev, Federation Street, Mount Hawthorn, talking to item 9.1 as well. Good evening, councillors and mayor. I stand before you not as just a local resident, but an advocate for community vibrancy, local entrepreneurship and the spirit of progress. The proposal to convert the 84-year-old dwelling into a small cafe is not just about bricks and mortar. It's about fostering connections, enriching experiences and revitalising our neighbourhood. This cafe isn't about just serving coffee. It's about serving as a hub of community life, a place where bonds are forged and stories are shared. Beyond its symbolic significance, this cafe holds tangible benefits for our community, provides local employment opportunities, injects vitality, eyes on our street, and enhances the appeal of our neighbourhood for residents and visitors alike. I do not consider the proposal as an intrusion into our neighbourhood. I and many others view it as an enhancement. I acknowledge that change can be daunting, and concerns have been raised about parking, noise, toilets. I wasn't expecting that one. However, I do not believe we should allow the perception of fear and the unknown to overshadow opportunity. With thoughtful planning and open communication, such concerns can be alleviated to ensure that the cafe integrates into our neighbourhood. I do urge Council to carefully consider the conditions and their impact on this proposal. I am concerned about the number of conditions that are proposed, causing it to be very difficult to open the doors and succeed into the future. In particular, condition 2.3, limiting the number of staff members to only 2, just does not seem operationally practical. Condition 2.4, restricting the number of people to 14, may be more relevant during pandemic times. Condition 3.2 and 3.3, preventing queuing outside, which is difficult to police for both the operator and the local government. Condition 4, requiring an acoustic report, seems to be very onerous and costly.
Always an issue. We do have a lot of cars with football. We have the football siren going, but that's just that's
The items that have been spoken on are going to be brought forward on the agenda and discussed first. So there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:33. Governance Manager, could you please confirm if any written statements were received?
Confirming that we received written statements from Lauren Spenceley of Mount Hawthorn in relation to item 9.1, Shannon Fernandez of Mount Hawthorn, Emily Hunt of Mount Hawthorn, Tanya Watts of Mount Hawthorn, Felicity Keys of Mount Hawthorn, all in relation to 9.1, Blake Rollinson of Perth in relation to item 9.2, and Dudley Meyer of Highgate. Any questions that were asked in those questions will be included in the agenda of the next meeting.
Okay, so responses to previous public questions are now listed in the agenda. I've received 3 requests for leave of absence from Councillor Alex Castle from the 3rd to the 7th of May for personal reasons, Councillor Suzanne Warner from the 6th to the 13th of May inclusive for personal reasons, and myself, Mayor Alison Xamon, from the 10th to the 17th of July for personal reasons. Are there any other applications for leave of absence? Okay, do I have a mover for those applications? It's moved Councillor Wallace. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Wolf. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We haven't received any petitions this council meeting. We have got one deputation from Daniela Merger. In relation to item 9.1. Please come forward. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Xamon and councillors. My name is Daniela Merger from Urbanista Town Planning, and tonight I'm speaking in favour of the officer's recommendation to approve the proposed cafe at number 5 Berryman Street in Mount Hawthorn. Firstly, I would like to thank Council for their questions at the briefing session last week and to provide the officers and to the officers for their responses in the briefing notes. Tonight, I'll be using this time to also provide a response to your questions and to the amendments made to the officer's recommendation. In regards to condition 2.3, we acknowledge and fully support the officer's amended condition, allowing residents of the single house to work in the cafe without restrictions. So thank you for that. As mentioned at the briefing session last week, we maintain our strong objection to conditions 3.2 and 3.3. Condition 3.2 prohibits the use of the adjacent footpath and verge for dining, queuing, or waiting for takeaway. Notwithstanding, I have read the officer's briefing notes and I can appreciate the potential consequences that they have raised, although in my opinion, it is probably slightly extreme in this case. To compensate for the proposed removal of condition 3, I respectfully request Council to consider a new condition or an amended condition 2.4 that, subject to an alfresco dining permit, allows for a maximum of 6 patrons to dine in the adjacent footpath or verge area. And I want to clarify that the proposal is also to maintain the total maximum of patrons to 14 as recommended in condition 2.4. This condition will allow a degree of flexibility to use the adjacent verge space and to provide some outdoor seating when the weather is permitting. This will also provide the council with some comfort in knowing what this space may look like should a permit be granted. With respect to queuing and waiting for takeaway in the verge space, realistically, this is highly unlikely to occur at this venue in any event. As per the plans, ordering is to occur inside the premises, and based on my experience waiting for coffee, generally you stand near the counter waiting for your name to be called, which in this case is inside the premises. Ultimately, what this comes down to is that policing and governing where people are to stand and wait for a coffee would be almost impossible for the city and has the potential to become a compliance nightmare. And for the operator, the awkwardness of having to direct customers on where to stand and to move them along if they're spending a little too long on the footpath in front of the cafe, it's just not ideal and doesn't create a great environment. It's not Chew Bakery, it's not the North Street store. This cafe has a much larger internal space to facilitate queuing and waiting internally. There is no need to create potential compliance issues over something that is very difficult to control. The removal of condition 4. So in addition to our request to remove conditions 3.2 and 3.3, we also seek Council's consideration to remove condition 4 relating to the acoustic report. The acoustic letter we provided includes an assessment of the assigned decibel levels for the subject site. These levels are calculated by adding site influencing factors to the minimum standard. In this case, the maximum assigned levels for the site are greater than the minimum standard due to the presence of influencing factors. Whilst I can appreciate that these decibel numbers may not mean much, the numbers provided in the report, For comparison, I've reviewed the acoustic report provided for Djaxo Cafe on the corner of Anzac Road and Coogee Street from the OMC agenda of the 19th of September 2017. This acoustic report models the general crowd noise levels from 6 patrons, which is what we are proposing in our amended condition, dining in the curbside area. This report suggests that the worst case scenario was for the neighbour directly abutting the property, and this produced a decibel level of 43 decibels. The acoustic letter we provided for this proposal calculates that the crowd noise levels should not exceed 47 decibels. On 23rd of July 2019, Council considered a change of use application for Boo Cafe on Bulwer Street. The administration recommended a condition for the preparation of an acoustic report. However, due to Council deeming the need for an acoustic report as excessive, Council approved an amended condition which states that an acoustic report is only required if a substantiated noise complaint is received. It is our opinion that an amended condition similar to Boo Cafe is appropriate. Council has been provided with more than enough information and comparable examples to make a reasonable assumption that the likelihood of compliance with the noise regulation is very high. Our acoustic letter provides the City with the information as to what the maximum assigned decibel levels are. Therefore, once the cafe is operational, the City is able to undertake noise testing to investigate whether any potential noise complaints are substantiated, i.e. do not comply with the assigned levels provided in the letter. If this happens to be the case, then such a condition would require the submission of an acoustic report at that time, and this report may include noise mitigation methods. However, until such time, we deem the preparation of a full acoustic report at a cost of thousands of dollars, which is really only going to tell us what we already know, to be onerous on a small business owner. We therefore respectfully request Council consider the same approach as Boo Cafe and amend Condition 4 accordingly. So to summarise, we respectfully request Council consider the following: the removal of Conditions 3.2 and 3.3, a new or amended condition allowing alfresco dining to a maximum of 6 patrons should a permit be submitted, an application for a permit be submitted. This number also aligns with the Djaxo Cafe in the curb. We also request the removal of existing Condition 4 relating to the requirement for an acoustic report and replacing with a new condition which requires an acoustic report in the event of a substantiated noise complaint. All things considered, Council should not have any concerns with this proposal, and this is the type of development that should be celebrated. In my past experience working and living in and for the City of Vincent, I've seen numerous...
Please wrap up your comments. Thank you.
Numerous historical corner stores converted to residential and closed off from the community or sadly demolished entirely. This proposal preserve and reinvigorate an original, largely unmodified corner shop from the 1940s, and as you have heard from local residents this evening, this proposal is widely supported. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, I need a mover that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 19th of March 2024 be confirmed. So that's moved, Councillor Warner, and seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Okay, so I've just got a few things that I want to make some comments on. So the first thing is I wanted to draw to people's attention the fact that the 50-kilometre zone speed limit signs are in the process of being pulled out at the moment, and they're going to be replaced by the 40-kilometre-per-hour zone. So if anyone's wondering what's happening with the speed limits, it doesn't mean that suddenly there's no speed limit at all. It means the opposite, that we are actually putting in place the 40-kilometre-per-hour zones. So that's just something for people to be aware of. I also want people to know that the Hyde Park Reference Group has started meeting. This is, of course, the group of professionals and local experts who are providing advice as to the future of Hyde Park replanting and what that will look like, being mindful of both the built and cultural heritage. So that has started meeting so that we have some clear guidance as to the best way to be able to move forward with replanting following the removal of trees as a result of the polyphagous shot hole borer. Just also want to comment on what's happening with the lake at the moment, because there's been quite a lot of concerns raised as to the fact that it has dried out to such a degree. And the concern is that the city has already reached the 95% of its water allocation. And so the city has gone to Water Corp to see if that allocation can be lifted, because part of the concern is also that we have got, along with whole other parts of Western Australia, our trees are dying, and they are dying, our verge trees as well as other trees. And this is really a crisis for us as a whole, but obviously here in the city, where we really do value our tree canopy, is particularly concerning. So that is an issue that our gardens team is well and truly on, and trying to see if we can negotiate to be able to save as many of our trees as we possibly can. This is the sort of effect of climate change that we need to be looking at addressing, and precisely the sorts of things that had been foreseen and we need to be able to address. Speaking further about Hyde Park, I just want to say there's been quite a few residents contact me about interest in establishing a Friends of Hyde Park group as on an ongoing basis. And my response to that is, what a fantastic idea. In my previous roles, I've worked with friends of various groups around the metropolitan area, where local residents have taken responsibility for supporting a particular green space. Sometimes it's urban bushland, sometimes it's a particular park, and it can be a really wonderful way for the community to assist council in terms of preservation and upkeep of these sites. The sorts of friends groups that I've seen operate really well in other areas take responsibility, for example, of assisting with graffiti removal, removal of rubbish, weeding programs, monitoring programs, giving advice to council as to what's actually happening and suggestions for ways to improve. But I think the important thing is these friends groups don't simply say to the council, hey, it's all up to you to sort out everything, and by the way, we're going to have to up the rates quite considerably in order to do that, but actually will take ownership over a particular area. And where these groups actually take ownership and work collaboratively with the council, I have found that you get terrific outcomes. And on that note, I also want to recognise that Friends of Smith Lake are also looking at establishing a friends group for that little precious part of Vincent that is a wetland, and what a good opportunity that will be to ensure that we can have maintenance of what is just a local patch of potential and important habitat. We need to be able to look at ways to ensure that these linkages for our local fauna, and particularly our bird life, are able to be maintained and are able to be supported. So I'm really looking forward to that. And because I've got the microphone, I want to say I hope that if any other people want to take charge of setting up local friends groups, I'm more than happy to go out and meet with those residents to talk about ways that it could work and ways that they can be established, and also hopefully being community-led and working collaboratively with the council. I think that would be absolutely marvellous. And talking about the good environmental stuff that we're doing, I just want to mention Saturday's native plant sale that's coming up, and note that it's actually the 20-year it's getting to the 20-year anniversary of that plant sale occurring, and acknowledge that this was initially an initiative from Sally Lake, who was employed by the Claysbrook Catchment Group at the time, and was part of an initiative, a joint initiative with Watercorp. I think we can all agree it's been a huge success, which is why we need to do it twice, and people are taking good advantage of it, including my husband, who always turns up, and we've been slowly replanting out our garden with bird attracting natives and that are also water wise. So I just want to say I think this is a terrific initiative, and I'm really proud that Vincent does this, and I'm a local resident that has been taking advantage of that for the whole time that I've been in Vincent. So a big thanks to those people who come up with these good ideas that end up helping to contribute towards making our patch of the world just that little bit more sustainable. Okay. So CEO, could you please read out those declarations of interest?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, the declarations of interest as outlined in the briefing agenda from last week are as follows. Councillor Warner declared a financial interest in relation to item 10.1, the North Perth Bowling and Recreation Club synthetic bowling green conversion, noting that the interest is that Councillor Warner's son is employed at the club, and Councillor Warner is not seeking approval to participate in the debate, nor to remain in the chambers, nor to vote on the matter. Councillor Wolf declared an impartiality interest on the same item 10.1, noting that she has a long-standing relationship with the club. Councillor LaFontaine declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 10.1 as well, noting that she is a social member of the club. Councillor Castle also declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 10.1, noting that she is a social member of the club. Councillor Castle also declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 10.3, appointment of the design review panel, noting that she is acquainted with a number of the applicants on the panel. And that's all that I've received for tonight's meeting, Mayor Zaman.
Councillors, are there any other further late declarations? Okay. All right. Okay, so those items which are going to be brought forward are 9.2, 10.4 and 9.1, where the item which requires an absolute majority decision is 10.3. Okay, and we've of course got 10.1. So 10.1, in which Councillor Warner has declared financial interest. So, Councillor Warner, are there any other items you wish to speak to? Councillor Wallace, Councillor LaFontaine, Councillor Castle.
12.3, please.
Okay. Councillor Greer.
Nothing further.
Councillor Alexander. Councillor Wolf.
12.1, please.
Okay, so I'm just going to work out the order.
Confirming the following items will be moved on block: 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 10.2, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 12.2.
Okay, do we have a mover for that? Okay, that's moved Councillor Castle. We have seconded Councillor Wolf. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Okay, so the first item we're going to go to is 9.2, amendment to the Municipal Heritage Inventory, number 40, Guildford Road, Mount Lawley. Do we have a mover to discuss this item? That's moved Councillor Wallace. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Greer. Councillor Wallace, would you like to speak to this item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Simon. Look, I certainly appreciate the issues that Main Roads and DPLH are trying to address here. I think from a traffic perspective, this is an underperforming intersection, and agree that the changes are necessary to improve the current and future traffic flow through the area. I thank Mr. McGill from DPLH for his presentation last week. I agree with him that there's a massive shortfall of housing in Western Australia, including public housing specifically, and I welcome urgent action from the state to develop this land that's been in its possession and unoccupied for more than 20 years and a few property cycles. With respect to the building, the city's policy sets out that an item may be considered for removal where it cannot be practically retained on site. It's being requested to be removed in aid of some potential future road widening. I think compromises to ideal outcomes are regularly made during the design of infrastructure site like this, based on site constraints, and it's my view that this building is or should be a significant heritage feature and a worthy constraint to this design. The information that Main Roads provided includes a strong opinion that the shortening of these turning lanes from 180 to about 160 metres as required to retain this building will significantly influence the queue lengths and the functions of Guildford Road. But I don't believe that this has been demonstrated by the traffic assessment report, which I think only really answered the question of whether 1 or 2 turning lanes is appropriate. There's no objection to 2 turning lanes in this area, but in the absence of any modelling showing otherwise, I don't believe that the reduction of the length of those 2 lanes by 20 metres or about 12% will drastically alter their function. I understand this item has been deferred already to give Main Roads an opportunity to provide further advice on that, and that there is a preference from DPLH to receive certainty on the developable area of the wider site. So I don't think we should defer this item again, and I have an alternate prepared to retain this building on the Heritage Register. I guess with respect to DPLH's comments on the site and whether this building is a significant impediment to the provision of housing here, I don't really think that as it is. The wider site where this is proposed is over 8,000 square metres, and this building occupies only a very small part of that. The lots are zoned R100 and can definitely take height and density, and I think a well-maintained heritage building included within that would be a strong addition to the site and the surrounding community. I'd refer to the aged care facility across the road from Beatty Park, where a very high and dense facility was built around a retained heritage house as its centrepiece. So my alternate for retention of this on the Municipal Heritage Inventory does include an instruction to issue a heritage conservation notice, and I did note admin's comments on that regarding the time and money costs involved in pursuing it. I guess I'm interested to hear what council thinks about that, but I personally believe that if we do think this item should be retained on the MHI, we should follow that through to its conclusion, which includes following our enforcement policy on these items. But I can't support this, and I do have an alternate if it fails.
Okay, can I just confirm you're not moving it at this point?
No. Well,
okay.
No.
So, okay. No, that's fine. Okay, so in that case, I'm going to go to the seconder to speak on this matter. Is that Councillor Greer?
Thank you, Mayor Simon. Want to put my remarks similar to Councillor Wallace in terms of the importance of having a range of housing opportunities in this part of town. We know there's a real need for a diversity of housing, affordable housing and social housing throughout the city of Vincent. We have also heard from the community tonight very clearly of the importance of our heritage places and a lot of love of the history of the building, which has now been left to be basically looks like it's ready to be torn down and abandoned by the state government, which is deeply disappointing. I did have a couple of questions, if now's an appropriate time to ask them, of administration. Excellent. The first one is the community spoke to the importance of the protection of the trees around that property, and particularly for the black cockatoos. I was just wondering if administration could speak to that consideration and the role of the City of Vincent around the protection of the trees on that land.
Administration.
Through the chair, yes, I guess the issue around the protection and retention of those trees currently on the site is a side issue to what is currently before you, which is purely a request to remove the property from the MHI. The R code, which governs residential development and would apply when the state government progresses through the next stage of the housing diversity pipeline project, stipulates, identifies for existing trees to be retained where they meet certain criteria. So based on the comments from the gallery tonight, it would seem that some of those trees would at least meet that criteria and would go through part of that assessment process. But the issue of tree retention is a separate one to what is before you.
Excellent, thank you. That's all my questions for now.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak on this matter? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I must admit I was back and forth on this issue, this item, when we dealt with it last time and today. But I am very much swayed by Councillor Wallace's well-articulated argument. Thank you. And I do feel that he has summarised the issues well for me. While I possibly had some sort of fatalistic resignation to the ultimate demise of this building, I now see that I think this is a good opportunity for the city to push back and to demand more from the state government. I think we haven't had demonstrated to us that there is a need to remove this building. There are other options available in relation to the slip lanes proposed. There are other options that can be explored in relation to the development of the site. I would certainly be urging the state government to include retention of those mature trees when the time comes for that. But I do think it is important for the city to hold fast on what is a treasure and has been left to go to rack and ruin in a very disappointing state. So I'm not going to support the officer recommendation, and I look forward to the alternative being moved.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the substantive motion? Councillor Warner.
Thank you, Mayor Shimon. I'm going to say I'm in total agreement with my colleagues who have already spoken tonight, and thank you to Councillor Wallace for, as you said, Alex, a very articulate argument. I acknowledge the fact that the intersection needs to be investigated and adjusted, and I also acknowledge the fact that social housing is desperately needed. But basically, once this house is gone, it's gone. And the implications of that are quite large, and I think they need to be really considered. Ultimately, if we agree with the recommendation here, we're ultimately endorsing a strategy of overcoming the obstacle of something being on a heritage list by just letting it be neglected. I'm ashamed that this house has sat in that state. It was discussed in 2007 and retained on the heritage list, and it's been allowed to neglect for almost another 20 years to it's such a terrible state. Like Councillor Castle, I don't hold out much hope for it, but I would really, really love to see that it could be retained. The likely impact on the local environment, the trees, this is something that we need to be saving where we can. And I think that the implications of removing this will start to impact on that. We've had immense public commentary in support of retaining this, and I'd like to acknowledge the people who are here tonight and who wrote in. And our local community are keen to engage on potential site improvements on this. So I think they're a fantastic local voice that we should be tuning into and seeing what they've got to offer so we can make a really compatible, supportive space that ticks a lot of the boxes here that we need. Oh, and I look forward to seeing an alternate.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this motion? Councillor Wallace, would you like to summarise your comments in relation to this motion? Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, that's against is carried unanimously. Councillor Wallace, you had an alternative motion that you wish to put.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to move the motion on green here. Do I need to read it out for the?
Councillor Wallace, we're just trying to get it onto the screen right now because there's a lot there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to move it
You're
as
just going
written.
to move that motion?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Seconded Councillor Greer. Councillor Wallace, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I think I've said my piece on it. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Greer, would you like to speak to the alternative motion?
Yes, just a question of administration. You've mentioned there's quite significant time and money costs with proceeding with this proposal. Could you just speak a little bit more to what you understand the financial implications to be?
Through the chair, yes, so those implications would be, I guess, initially in respect to the preparation of the heritage conservation notice. So under the local planning regulations, which gives the head of power to issuing a conservation notice, that notice is to stipulate the extent of works and the standard of works that are required. At this juncture, we don't have information on what either of those would entail, so we would likely need to get some advice from a heritage consultant as well as potentially a structural engineer to understand exactly what needs to be specified as part of that heritage conservation notice. So that would be the initial implications.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Would anyone else like to speak to the alternate motion? Councillor Castle.
Thank you. I just have a follow-on question from that. With the wording of clause 2 of this alternative recommendation, there's no time frame attached to that. Does administration consider that that would allow you to take some time to gather that information required, and not suggesting this should drag on for a long time, but that can then be planned in terms of budget allocation?
Through the chair, yes, I guess initially it would be to understand or to go out and to get quotes from the necessary consultants and to understand what that would look like.
Are there any further comments or questions? I'd like to make some comments. I want to echo the concerns which were raised from the floor about how frustrating it is when you have heritage buildings which are allowed to just simply fall into decay. I note the comment that there are penalties, but can I say those penalties are woefully inadequate? And I think we've got a situation here whereby by demolition by neglect is not something which should be rewarded. How disappointing that this particular house has been allowed to fall to rack and ruin in the way that it has. It makes an absolute mockery of our state heritage laws, that the state government as the owner can enable that to occur. And I think it is very important that we as a council, in our efforts to preserve as much of our heritage as we can, make it very clear that we expect more. We expect more from private landholders, but we expect it also from other tiers of government. I also want to note the concerns which have been raised around the preservation of those trees. That, of course, is not something which fits in with this particular motion, but I echo completely and totally the need to ensure that any future development is done sympathetically and in conjunction with the existing mature trees that are there on site, which are beautiful and necessary. I am very supportive of having housing in this space and high density housing, and I look forward to seeing that area developed. do accept that there needs to be some road treatment, but I share the concerns expressed by Councillor Wallace as to the necessity to have it to the full extent that has been proposed. I'm sure that it is not beyond the wit of good designers, good architects, of many of which we deal with within the council, to be able to come up with a design which will both be able to incorporate the heritage of this particular building, but also maintain the trees, also have a slipway, and also ensure that we've got high density housing, which I hope will include affordable housing. And I'm once again going to plug, I also hope it has housing that has been specifically built for people with physical disabilities so that they can be in a city and close to public transport routes. So very disappointing that a heritage house has been able to be treated this way, and I'm looking forward to a win-win solution for heritage, for trees, for high density housing, and for dealing with traffic issues, which is not impossible. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Wallace, is there anything you'd like to say in response? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Okay, so now we move to item 10.4, Brisbane Street response to petition. Do I have a mover for this item? That's moved, Councillor LaFontaine. Do I have a seconder? Okay, so seconded Councillor Castle. Okay, Councillor LaFontaine, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, thank you. I have a proposed amendment. Can I speak to that item now?
Did you want to just speak to the item first, or do you want to speak to the item in the context of your amendment?
I will speak to the item in the context of the amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Well, okay. You're so going to put the amendment now and speak to that. Okay. Yeah. It would. I was thinking it would be preferable for us to discuss this first,
sure,
and for then for you to move that amendment, if that's okay. So, did you want to discuss?
I don't have any comments. They're all particular to the amendment, so I'll let someone else speak. Thank you.
Not a problem. So that was Councillor Castle. Would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions that were raised in the gallery tonight. The traffic warrant scoring system was included in the report. Thank you for that. But there was a question raised about the narrow carriageway of the street, and I've just wondered if we could have some commentary on whether that is captured as part of that scoring system.
Through the chair, yes, the warrant scoring has a number of parameters, and how the road is configured and sight lines has been taken on board with that.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, in the table 1 that's been included in the report, where there is traffic parameters such as road design and topography, and then there are a couple of subcategories, they are examples, that's not an exhaustive list, is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had, there was a suggestion raised in the gallery about a deep embayment of the parking bays as a possible solution to the carriageway issues. Is that something that administration has considered or has a view on?
Through the chair, we would need to go through the concept design to look at it further, but generally verges are restrictive in regards to trees and services, etc. So with my experience, we probably wouldn't have that opportunity to do the amendment into the verge area.
Okay, but that is something that could be considered and reported on to council.
Through the chair, the engineering team can consider that, yes.
Thank you. Okay, just briefly, I'm supportive of the officer recommendation. I do note the the amendment that might be coming forward, which might address some of the questions that I've just asked. So happy to wait for that to be moved, but broadly supportive and happy to move to the next stage with this.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this matter? I'd like to just make some comments, and I really want to thank those local residents for the way they've gone about having the discussions around this, the good faith in which they have put forward the petition, and the good faith in which they have engaged with both the elected representatives and with the administration to try to bring this to our attention and to get resolution. I have to say it's a really great way to operate, so thank you very much. I recognise myself just personally that there has to be some sort of traffic calming measures around there. We are seeing increasing levels of traffic and rat running around that entire area. And in fact, at that particular corner, I almost got towed up on my e-scooter at one point. So I've personally experienced people that are not driving with care around that particular area. So I imagine it would be quite concerning for people who are needing to navigate that particular road every single day, and particularly with your car parked out the front of your house. I am concerned to make sure that whatever solution we come up with, that it doesn't adversely impact on those local businesses, because I want to have those cafes thrive. I want to have those smaller local supermarkets thrive. I do think that generally people who are going to go to the Northbridge Hotel should probably not be driving, but that aside, I think that we need to be very careful to get that balance right. And if there is any suggestion that people from outside of the area are parking there for extended periods of time and not utilising those businesses, we should be doing what we can to provide disincentives from people to park in that area just because it happens to be relatively close to the CBD. So that's something I'm particularly concerned about. But I recognise it's not up to us as councillors to determine exactly what traffic calming measures are appropriate, but it's good to see that this is being prioritised. Would anyone else like to speak to the substantive motion? Councillor Wallace.
Sorry, I will ask just one question. Thanks, Ms. Amon. I think it was identified tonight and previously that the Lake and Brisbane Street intersection is particularly troublesome, particularly sightlines coming in and out of the lake there. I know we had relative success with the mini roundabout program north of Hyde Park. Is that an option for that intersection that admin is looking at or could potentially look at as a low-cost one?
Through the chair, the administration's already reached out to Main Roads, and we're going to have further discussions in the weeks to come on that.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further speakers on the substantive motion? Okay, Councillor LaFontaine, would you like to move your proposed amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Can we just wait? We'll get the amendment up on the screen so that everyone can see that. And councillors, we are looking at the blue paper.
Yes, so in response to that point...
Sorry, I just need a seconder for that. Is there a seconder for this amendment? Okay, seconded, Councillor Wallace, thank you. Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you, Mayor. Dot point 4, that the officer report refers to longer term measures in response to a specific request from residents of Brisbane Street, as we've heard in the gallery tonight. And I've just captured that request as a commitment here as part of this motion. And dot point 4, with reference to the parking, I would say that I would be generally against paid parking on local access residential streets, as it prevents guests, families and friends from freely accessing homes without charge. And this amendment offers the 1p parking or the paid parking for consultation for the residents of the street to determine their preference. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, just a second to wish to speak. Councillor Walls.
Thank you, Ms. Amon. Yeah, look, I'm supportive of this. I think the new item 4 addresses one of the main problems that we're trying to look at here. So having some clarity around that and extra investigation, I think is worthwhile. I'm not sure if I would support 1P parking here, but happy to have the residents' opinion consulted on that.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment by Councillor LaFontaine? Councillor Greer.
Just to say that I'm supportive of it. I did have a question. I'm not quite sure it's best directed to, but with the 1P parking, if that I support the principle of it being a time limited free parking, but was wondering if there's if we could just call it introduction of free to capture that it's not necessarily just 1 hour, so that we can talk to the local businesses and others to understand if 1 hour is it or if it's 2 hours. Just so that we're not only consulting on 1 hour free or paid. If we'd be open to just free parking limit or.
So are you proposing an amendment to the amendment?
More a question. I guess my question is then where did the 1 hour prescription come from? If that's from community, happy to go with it. If not, is there scope to broaden that out?
Okay, so we'd go to the director. I know the parent would go to the director on that. So yes.
Thank you through the chair. I'm fairly sure that the parking restriction in that area is currently 2p at the moment. So that's probably where the status quo sits, and looking at a reduction as a consequence would be either to 1p or paid parking.
Does that answer your query?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Alexander.
Oh, look, I'd just be a little wary of the 1 hour parking. I know where I live, we used to have 3 hour parking, now it's 1. People change their cars far more regularly. So, I suggest, the 2 or 3 hour makes a lot more sense, and to consider that, that's all.
Councillor Wolf, you indicated you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor LaFontaine, for introducing this proposed amendment. I think it very strongly reflects what we have heard from the community in terms of the rat running being an issue, and in terms of the need for a longer term solution. And it's been done in a way that really is inclusive of the community and that community consultation. So I'm supportive of this as well.
Okay, does anyone else wish to speak to Councillor LaFontaine's amendment? Councillor LaFontaine, would you like to conclude your remarks? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. So now I'll go back to the, so now that's amended the substantive. So Councillor LaFontaine, as the mover of the original motion, do you wish to wrap up any further comments? Okay, so all those, I will put the amended motion. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move to item 9.1, number 5, Berryman Street, Mount Hawthorn, change of use from single house to single house and restaurant cafe. Do we have a mover for this proposal? That's moved Councillor Wolf. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Castle. Councillor Wolf, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll begin by acknowledging the residents who came to speak at the briefing and today, and to the many residents who've contacted councillors about this application. Trying to accommodate such a change of use, a commercial arrangement within a residential area is always going to be challenging. There are always going to be diverse views, and there are diverse views that we have heard as councillors. But I will also acknowledge the overwhelming majority of the views, at least that were presented to me from the community, were in favour of this proposal. To me, the proposal really represents what we're about at the City of Vincent. There was a corner store operating at this site from the 30s until the 60s, and we've got somebody looking to restore it to the low-scale commercial use servicing the neighbourhood. And with plenty of parking, at most times not much traffic, a gated playground nearby, getting a coffee and going to Menzies Park becomes your activity for the day if you're home with a baby. It becomes your place to see a friend on the weekend, to enhance your dog walk or to enhance your family's day out at kids' sport. So more than just improving amenity on the west side of Mount Hawthorn, for me, this is about the creation of a vibrant and connected place for the community, similar to what we've seen at Hobart Street or Hyde Park. Just to talk to the process here, understand that the original application was lodged on the 16th of August. The process has been a long one. It has been drawn out, and I will say that that doesn't, although acknowledging, of course, that it's very challenging, that doesn't necessarily reflect who we are and who we do want to be in terms of supporting small businesses where it does make sense, like to me it does in this application. So I think there is opportunity to review the process and to, once it's finalised, and to learn some lessons that we can take from this process to ensure that they do run more smoothly in the future, and that they do continue to encourage future low-scale investment within Vincent. Of course, to go to the issue at heart, being a residential area, we do need to make sure that we've got appropriate controls in place for the neighbours and to minimise disturbance to them. But I feel like the conditions that are being proposed, as we have heard from the community, do go too far for a business of this scale. And I feel like some of the conditions will make it unreasonably difficult to operate the business. So on that note, Councillor Castle and I have a proposed amendment prepared. So thank you to Carson and administration for assisting with preparing that. It's the amendment on the yellow, and that one seeks to alter the conditions in a way that we see makes them more complementary to the scale of the operations. So we'd be happy to move that one now, but I imagine there are others who also wish to speak on this one.
Hey, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I wholeheartedly support this proposal. I am a local resident. This will be my local coffee shop. I'm very familiar with the area, with the context, and with the use of that area of Mount Hawthorn out of Menzies Park. I would actually venture to say that there's probably not many people in Mount Hawthorn who haven't walked or driven past this property and thought, really love to turn that into a cafe one day. So many people say that to me. I've thought it myself. So I'm really excited to see that someone is finally doing it. Having said that, I know it is a commercial use in a residential area, and that brings a lot of challenges, and it's something that we have to balance. That's what really this whole debate is about, is how are we going to balance the competing needs of the owners of the property, the business that is being proposed, and the residents who live nearby and those who live a little bit further afield. I agree that I think the conditions that we have before us are too onerous. What we have is a very small scale development. We're talking about 14 people provided for in this cafe. I ultimately don't believe that this will add any further impact on amenity to the surrounding area than is already felt by Menzies Park. That is a really well-used park. On a weekend when it's full of Auskick kids or cricket players, or on a day when the Mount Hawthorn Primary School has their athletics carnival, it is a buzzing zone. And that, I acknowledge, has already had an impact on those residents. I don't believe that a cafe with 14 chairs in it is going to make a big difference beyond what is already felt by the surrounding community. The way that this cafe is designed, all of that impact is oriented towards the park, and there is actually a buffer between the next door neighbours in Berryman because of the quite wide frontage of the property. So I do think that it can accommodate what is a very small scale development. I do understand that the administration's approach, it's been quite a conservative one, and they have been trying to get the balance right in considering everybody's needs. It is a residential area, and I think what we're talking about is just trying to find where we draw the line that suits as many people as possible. But I think where I have landed is that these conditions are too onerous for what is a tiny little cafe. I'm very conscious that we may condition this business out of viability, and that we may, in the efforts to try and appease everyone, appease no one. So I will move the amendment on the yellow in a minute, unless anyone else would like to speak first. I did want to make a couple of points for clarification, in particular around the alfresco or the potential for alfresco. We had this discussion last week, and I just wanted to reiterate that what is approved tonight in terms of numbers is the total number that can be accommodated on this property. If there is a future application for an outdoor eating permit that allows a limited or unlimited number of people in the outdoor eating area, that will not increase the number from 14. I also had a comment on the parking. We are seeing something different to what was presented to us last week due to the street tree, fully in support of retaining that street tree. And I think that this is quite a unique location in that there is already substantial parking available. So I'm quite comfortable with the reduction of parking that's been proposed this week. I did just want to make the point. Last week I asked a question about the eco-zoning of the verge and was given the answer that this application didn't rely on that parking. I think that's changed now, and so I'm just making the point that when that verge treatment and consideration is given to how we're going to rehabilitate that area, is that we remember that we're relying on a bit of the parking here for this particular application. Happy to see if anyone else would like to speak before moving the amendment, or if not, I will move it.
Okay, does anyone else wish to speak to the substantive motion that's in front of us? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Zaman. I've gone back and forth on this one quite a bit. I think there's strong community interest in a cafe at this location, and conceptually a cafe can be an acceptable and complementary use within a residential zone, something confirmed by our local planning scheme, and in particular in a location like this that abuts public open space. We are being asked to consider a change in land use as part of this application, which I think sets a high bar, and therefore the work does need to be done by the applicant to demonstrate that the proposed use and operation can fit comfortably within the surrounding area and residential uses. So to me, this does swing on impacts on the surrounding residences and whether those are acceptable. Parking was a fair concern. I do note the late removal of 2 car bays to accommodate the retention of verge trees, which I support. I think that this is acceptable based on the reasoning in the report. As just discussed, Menzies has available parking across the road, and the city is investigating improvements to that. So if this were to be approved, I'd hope that administration would consider the potential extra demand from this use when implementing an upgrade there. Most significant, I think, are the potential noise impacts. I acknowledge the information the applicant provided with respect to expected noise within the noise letter and the deputation tonight. I agree that the assigned levels for receptors have been set out, but as a full acoustic report has not been provided to demonstrate compliance with those levels for internal or in particular external uses of the lot. I think it's therefore appropriate to apply conditions 3.2, 3 and 4 as written. So regarding the other items for discretion, I agree with admin's report, and I'm inclined to support this item unamended.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Alexander.
This application concerns me, given that the area has been single-use residential for over 60 years, and many of the people that are supporting this are 100 metres away, and not next door to this particular change of use. And I'm not sure how happy they would be if it was next door to their property. So I have some concerns about the number of conditions, being put on this particular development, parking, toilets issues, noise issues, all of those sorts of things. And I don't necessarily have the confidence that they will be well controlled. whatsoever. So I see this going in with all these myriad of conditions, which my experience, I suspect won't be necessarily all that well controlled. So, I would be opposed to the current suggestion that a restaurant commercial use in a residential area.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to the substantive motion? Councillor Warner.
Thank you. I have my own personal experience of living just metres away from a cafe in a residential area, and I can only shout from the rooftops what a great amenity it's been to our local community. So I'm supportive of this recommendation. I do have concerns also about the conditions. I also have my own proposed amendment that I'd like to table, perhaps after Councillor Castle has done hers, that addresses some of those other things. But I think we're talking about a change of use, and the neighbours who are complaining are actually already existing in a place that has had its own change of use from the Scout Hall. So we've had the suburb evolve over generations here, and I think we need to keep moving with that, but preserving what is dear to everybody. So yeah, I'm in support of this.
Are there any other people who wish to speak to the substantive motion? Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. I also have concerns about the amenity impacts of the proposed, and just considering that the neighbours that will be most impacted by this will cease to have the quiet enjoyment of their property. Yeah, that's all.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. Just to note that I have been deliberating about this and still am. It's very tough. I think that I am landing on the side of supportive of the change of use, particularly around the impact that it will have on building community in that area. I think the more opportunities we have to get people to get to know their neighbours and to get to make the most of our public open spaces, that this will enable that. But I am very mindful of getting the right balance, and I'm particularly concerned about the noise implications and what it means to get that balance right going forward. So thanks.
I'd like to make some comments about the substantive motion. I'm generally in support of taking our small heritage corner shops and repurposing them in a way that is going to be sympathetic to the surrounds. The concerns I've got about the development are a bit different to what other people are raising, and I would like to get administration's response to this. In particular, I'm concerned about the occupational health and safety issues of not having a toilet on site and what that actually means for the workers. So I know may seem a bit out there, but that was something that I'm particularly concerned about. So I was wondering if it could please be explained why it's not deemed necessary to have a toilet on site, at least for the workers.
To you, Mayor Zaman. So under the National Construction Code, there is a requirement for a toilet to be provided. The applicant has decided that through that process, which is separate to the planning process and will occur at a later stage, they would like to approach a performance solution under the NCC. So that would be to not provide the toilet on site. So at the stage of the occupancy permit, if this is approved, they would engage a private certifier to essentially provide that performance solution. At this stage, without them having completed that assessment, we don't have the confirmation that that performance solution would be supported. But the applicant has discussed this with their surveyor, and they're confident that it can be achieved, and they're willing to proceed with the proposal without an on-site toilet. One of the reasons being that there is a publicly accessible toilet at Menzies Park, which both staff and customers can use. So that, just to confirm, would occur at a later stage. As part of this decision under the planning framework, there would be no nexus between requirements in the planning framework to require a toilet at this stage. So it wouldn't be a valid or reasonable condition for us to impose requiring the toilets at this stage. But the applicant is aware, and we've added advice notes on the determination that if they're unable to achieve a performance solution at the time of occupancy permit, they may be required to come back and get an amended development application to provide the toilet somewhere on site.
Okay, so I do note that it has been foreshadowed that there's amendments coming forward from the floor to change a number of the conditions. And I note that there's been conditions imposed such as a limitation on the number of people that can work there at any given point. But as I understand it, that do not reside in the attached house. As I understand, that is what it's trying to do. Of course, if there was if you have conditions in place that mean that it is an incentive for people who reside there to also be part of the staffing profile, then the issue of the toilet would be resolved because it does actually have a toilet on site that could be used for staff, as long as the residence is part of the business itself. Can I just ask, is that part of the thinking behind some of the conditions that have been put forward by administration?
Through you, Mayor Simon, the conditions put forward by administration haven't considered the impact of the toilets at all, and that's because it isn't a requirement under the planning framework. But like you said, it would be reasonable for staff who reside at the house to use the toilet of the house. I don't believe that would be an issue, and that may be another reason for the performance solution that they would seek under the occupancy permit. So the condition around limiting the staff is the reasons behind that is in relation to managing the intensity of the use as well as the car parking demand.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further comments in relation to the substantive motion? Okay, so Councillor Castle, would you like to move your amendment?
Yes, please, Mayor Simon, that would be the amendment on the yellow.
Okay, and I note that is already been seconded by Councillor Wolf. So Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Thank you. Look, it's really some of the same points that I made earlier. I think for me, I'm concerned that some of the conditions proposed are onerous and not in proportion to the scale of the development, and also unenforceable, or at least not in any practical way. So the proposal in this amendment is, in the first stage, to limit, in condition 2.4, to limit the number of people who can dine in the outdoor area to 6. This has the impact of setting some restrictions around what can be applied for in a future outdoor eating permit application, and goes some way to managing the impact of patrons being outside the property. That's read in conjunction with the following clause, which is to delete condition 3 and replace it with a new clause. The essential effect of that is to delete conditions 3.2 and 3.3 because I believe that they're too onerous. I don't think they are something that can be reasonably enforced or reasonably expect the business owner to manage. And I also think they can be adequately managed through the operation management plan. So that is the gist of deleting that condition and replacing it with the suggested condition on the yellow. The other part of that is to introduce an opportunity for the applicant to demonstrate that the impact of operating services such as delivery, food preparation and cleaning outside of the operating hours can be managed subject to the acoustic report. On the matter of the acoustic report, I do note the comments in the gallery about the cost and the burden of requiring that from the applicant. But I think that is part of this balance that we're seeking here. It's like if we are going to relax conditions on the one hand, then we need to ensure that we have covered them on the other hand. But one of the issues with this matter has been that we don't have current acoustic modelling, and I believe that by providing the acoustic report and by tying some of these relaxations to the provision of that, we can manage those requirements that way. So that's really the guts of this amendment. Happy for others to speak on it.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Castle, for talking us through. I think the fundamental reason that we propose this amendment comes down to the scale of the proposed operations. Of course, the considerations that we need to balance are all valid in the context of this residential area, but the reason we put this forward comes down to the small scale and trying to propose something that we felt was more appropriate, commensurate to that scale, whilst still providing an environment that gives the business a chance to operate successfully.
Hey, would anyone else like to speak on the amendment, the proposed amendment? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Simon. I guess my view on it is, as it was currently proposed to be approved, it was small scale, but by removing the limitation for queuing outside, it can easily grow to a large scale without further control from the city. And with respect to the permitting people to dine on the adjacent verge areas, I think, noise modelling hasn't been provided, or a satisfactory noise report hasn't been provided in support of that. So in the absence of that, I think it's appropriate to leave that condition as is. I think I agree with admin on this, which is not to support the removal of, do not support amendments to condition 2.4 and condition 3, which includes the removal of condition 2, but I would be supportive of the amendment to condition 3.4 if this failed in its current state.
Mayor, could I just ask that we could potentially split the vote on the two conditions, on 1 and 2 of the amendment if necessary?
Okay, that's noted. Thank you very much. And we can come back to that. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that my thoughts are quite similar to Councillor Wallace. I think that in order to maintain amenity to those who will be most impacted by this, I think that it's important that those conditions are in place. So I'm not supportive of the removal of that 3.2. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Councillor Castle, do you wish to move to amend your amendment?
Just ask a question, if I may, about how that we might actually do that. I was thinking we could just extract 3.2 of the new proposed condition 3, but I don't think that will work because the numbering will be all wrong.
Okay, well, I'm just going to hold this for the moment and we'll get answers to that.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, yes. So essentially we can extract condition 3.2 on the yellow, and that would essentially replace condition 3.4 as recommended in the officer recommendation.
I don't think that would be it would need to be a new amendment, I think.
Yes,
I'll check with my seconder, but I'm kind of leaning towards just going for broke and see what happens.
Okay, so at this point you're proposing to put the entire amendment? Okay. Is anyone, so I'm just trying to think, is anyone still wishing to speak? Okay, did you want to respond? Did you want to respond to the amendment? Okay, all those in favour of the amendment in whole as it stands? Those against? Okay, so that's 4 each. So I use my casting vote to defeat that amendment. But now we can look at a revised amendment
Yes.
to the.
Can I move a second amendment to replace condition 3.4 with condition 3.2 on the yellow?
Just to clarify, none of the other changes on the yellow?
It's a little bit hard for me to tell how that's going to go. So let's do them one at a time.
Okay, so as I understand it, Councillor Castle, you're moving that condition 2.4 is amended to read as follows, and it's as per the yellow, as per 2.4 written on the yellow amendment.
No, sorry, 3.4 is being replaced with 3.2. Do I have to do it in order? I'm just doing that one first.
Okay, so sorry, my eyesight, I can't see that because I am an old woman with bad eyesight. So I'm trying to actually be clear on what it is that we're voting on. Thank you. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to ask, I'm just going to check, are councillors satisfied that they know what is being presented for us to discuss? No, thank you, Councillor Alexander. I share your concerns. Sorry, there is actually considerable confusion about this, and there is a concern that what's being presented isn't actually going to have that effect. Did you want to, governance manager, did you want to quickly assess this?
Can I just confirm with Councillor Castle and also the manager that it's proposed to remove condition 3.4, which is not shown on the yellow at all, remove condition 3.4 and replace it with 3.2, which is shown on the yellow.
Okay, so are people clear on what's being proposed? Okay, so Councillor Castle, you're moving that. Do I have a seconder for that, for this new amendment? Seconded by Councillor Wolf. Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak to this new amendment? Councillor Wolf, do you wish to speak to this new amendment? Okay, does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment, including asking questions? Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you. Yes, could I just get a clarification with that amendment that it's gone. Okay, here it is. That if the acoustic report demonstrates that it can be undertaken at alternative hours, then the deliveries and servicings, pack down, cleaning, etc., can happen at all hours outside of the operation of the cafe.
Through Mayor Simon, that's correct.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you. And just to clarify, if that acoustic report demonstrates that, does that kind of give the tick of approval for deliveries and for cleaning? Like, I feel like cleaning the premises outside of hours is a not very noisy activity. You could do that. That sounds very reasonable. But would it give the tick for all of those, or would it be dependent on the outcomes of the acoustic report?
Through Mayor Simon, it may do. But it's dependent on the outcomes of the acoustic report. The applicant's operational management plan is very clear that they would still have deliveries throughout the day only. It's really to facilitate cleaning, pack up, set up half an hour before, half an hour after. But yeah, like I said, dependent on the acoustic report findings.
Thank you. And those activities, the cleaning, the pat down, would be kind of considered low noise or low risk of noise activities, do you think?
Through Mayor Simon, generally yes, given they would be contained within the indoor premises. The acoustic report, though, would also assess the pack up and set down in the alfresco area, so setting up chairs and the like. As well as, yeah, any other servicing needed.
Thank you, that's all.
Councillor Alexander, did you wish to speak?
It all just seems very uncertain, you know, the making up the answers, you know, here tonight, you know, as we go, you know, it's just fraught.
Sorry, Councillor Warner, did you want to speak? Oh, sorry, I thought you put your hand up. Okay, so I've just got a question. So as I understand it, if it turned out that packing up and everything was happening at or was setting out at 6 in the morning was noisy, that would be able to be addressed through the usual noise complaint mechanisms. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So basically, if the acoustic modelling comes out and says that cleaning at 6:30 a.m. does not meet the assigned levels of the acoustic report, it would either provide measures for the operator or whatever the noise source is to mitigate that noise from occurring and to comply with the assigned levels of the noise regulations, or it would recommend that they do not commence that work until 7 a.m.
Mayor Simon, I'll just add to that. In terms of the acoustic report, ultimately it's difficult to speculate in terms of whether it will be noisy for, say, cleaning, because somebody might say that may be quiet, wiping down some tables may be quiet, but if you use an actual mechanical device to clean the windows and such, that might have a different noise impact. So all of those details will be fleshed out in the acoustic report. That's the purpose of the acoustic report. The management measures, the intended management measures, would need to be communicated by the operators and the applicant to the acoustic consultant, and then they step through different assigned levels of noise that are permitted during the course of a day and night and over the course of a week. And then it will work through whether it would satisfy or be less than those prescribed standards. And if it's not, then as my colleague was describing, then there can be some measures put in place, and those would form the recommendations of an acoustic report to ensure that it does comply with the with those prescribed standards ongoing So that's the intention. That's the security of an acoustic report.
Councillor Castle.
Unless others are going to speak, can I make some closing remarks?
Well, I'm going to see if other people are going to speak. So does anyone else wish to speak to this amendment? In that case, Councillor Castle, you can make some closing remarks.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the intention of this amendment. It is to give some level of flexibility to the applicant, but within the parameters as set by the acoustic report. So it is not intended to allow, or certainly my intention was not that if one activity is deemed appropriate, then all are, but that actually the report would examine each different type of activity and give some sort of indication about whether they could be accommodated in short windows before or after the operating hours, rather than the blunt instrument of set hours that they may not do any of those activities outside. So that's the intention of this amendment, and I believe that the detail that can be provided in the acoustic report can provide some guidance on that.
Okay, so now I'm going to move the amendment. All those in favour? Against? Okay, so that's carried, noting that Councillor Alexander and Councillor LaFontaine were against. Okay, so Councillor Castle, did you want to offer a further amendment?
I think I'll just try one more if I can. I would like to move the amendment on the yellow just clause 1, which is the clause that amends condition 2.4 to set a maximum number of people on the verge area.
Okay, is there a seconder to that amendment? That's one, and that's number 1 on the proposed amendment on the yellow paper. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded, Councillor Wolf. Councillor Castle, would you like to speak to this?
I would, but before I do, I have a question. I just want to make sure that this proposed amendment is not in conflict with condition 3.2 as it currently stands. 3.2 states at all times customers shall not queue, wait for takeaway orders or dine on the adjacent footpaths and verge areas to the satisfaction of the city. Last week when we discussed this clause, my understanding was that would preclude any application for outdoor eating. That was part of the purpose of the amendment as a whole, was to remove that requirement but then replace some level of restriction on outdoor eating with 2.4. If 2.4 was to be moved or to be accepted, would those two conditions be able to operate together?
Administration?
Through you, Ms. Simon, yes. So if condition 2.4 is amended to permit dining in the alfresco, condition 3.2 would also need to be amended to just remove the words or dine on adjacent footpaths. So yes, we would also need to amend that to allow the dining on in the alfresco.
Well, I'm going to live life on the edge and give it a go. So can the amendment read clause 1 as is written on the yellow, and then add number 2, which says condition 3.2, or delete the words or dine from condition 3.2.
Administration, would you like to respond to that proposal, to that proposal?
Through you, Ms. Simon, there would be no conflict with amending those conditions simultaneously, and it would effectively permit the 6 people to dine on the verge, and they would be able to attain the outdoor eating permit for that.
Okay, so people clear on, so that's first I need to just check. Councillor Wolf, are you happy to amend that amendment? Okay, so that is agreed. Are people clear on what it is that what is being proposed? So what's being proposed is to have condition 2.4 as amended to read as follows, and then it's 2.4 as presented on the yellow paper, and then, oh, we see, sorry, people are typing it around as I speak, like magic. Okay, and then it's got 3.2 amended accordingly. That's up on the screen. Okay, thank you. So would anyone like to speak on this amendment? You've spoken, Councillor Castle, you've spoken. Councillor Wolf?
I haven't spoken on the amendment.
I beg your pardon.
Sorry.
So we've got clarity on what amendment we're looking at. Councillor Castle.
Thanks. Look, I suppose in proposing this amendment, in keeping on flogging this issue, I'm returning to my initial comments, which is that I am concerned about conditioning this business out of viability. What we are left with here is not an intensity or an increase in intensity of the business. The maximum number of patrons is still 14. It will remain 14. With the previous or the original amendment not passing, we are still protecting the amplification of the impact with takeaway queuing. We are not limiting the option to seek alfresco dining or an outdoor eating permit. So what I'm really trying to achieve with this amendment is actually putting a cap on how many people might be able to sit on that verge, so that we don't end up in a situation where all 14 can sit on the verge and no one inside, which I think would be too big an impact. So that's the purpose of this amendment.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. Originally, I think we sought to amend 2.4 in the context of seeking a deletion to the conditions at 3.2 and 3.3 to provide some balance in the absence of those conditions. But in the context of that one not going up, I think I agree with the comments by Councillor Castle in terms of this still providing some flexibility to the business while providing some guarantees around capping the number of people who could be in the alfresco area at any one time.
Would anyone else like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Simon. My feelings are the same as administration's in their response to this item initially, that by permitting alfresco dining as well as queuing and waiting in the public realm, there'd be an increased risk of off-site amenity impacts to the surrounding residential properties. I think it hasn't been demonstrated through a noise report that this can be adequately managed, and yeah, I guess there's nothing precluding the applicant coming back in some time, potentially, with the support of some modelling and successful history of managing noise on their site and seeking such an item at that time. But I don't think I can approve it at this time. Thank you.
Hey, would anyone else like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Castle, would you like to respond? Okay, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Against? Okay, notice that's carried with Councillor Wallace, Councillor LaFontaine and Councillor Alexander against. Okay, are there any further amendments that are coming through, Councillor Castle? Okay, so now I'm going to pass over to Councillor Warner, who also has proposed many amendments. That's on the purple page in front of you. So firstly, I'm just going to confirm, Councillor Warner, did you want to proceed with all of these amendments as a whole?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So is there a seconder for Councillor Warner's proposed amendments? Seconded Councillor Greer. Okay, Councillor Warner, do you want to speak to your amendments?
Thank you, Mayor. Basically, what I'm seeking to do here is in line with the concerns about putting so many conditions on this business, and also considering the context of where we're actually located here. My amendment deals with the parking, and there was the implication of having 4 bays provided on site to cater for staff and for patrons. I'll acknowledge that, yeah, but that's sort of changed as of yesterday with the news about the street tree and how that's now been reduced to 2. So I'll take that as a semi-win. But I'm really concerned about why is it necessary to impose parking onto a business like this when it is across the road from a major park. It's a place that has over 500 booked events in one calendar year. We're talking about massive populations of people on weekends, the sports day. We're talking about a place with footy sirens where it's a massively visited place, and none of those occasions require specific parking beyond what is already there. So whilst the concerns about street parking in residential areas are completely valid, I feel like they've been effectively addressed by the existing infrastructure. The Park's northern verge has a great hard surface. The east and west verges are grassed, and the southern verge, although not looking terribly great, is due for improvement with plans for proper drainage and a suitable surface. And this ongoing development will not only serve park visitors during peak times, but also cafe customers throughout the week and minimise any impact on street parking. Given the cafe outlet is to serve a maximum of 14 people at one time, it has such a small footprint in terms of customer volume and associated parking needs. And many businesses in Vincent operate without imposing specific parking conditions, let alone those who are sitting right opposite a parking infrastructure. The cafe outlet would provide a convenient spot for park visitors and local residents to meet, relax and enjoy refreshments. And this adds to the overall experience and also fosters a sense of community. The proposed outlet opposite the park is well suited to the area's existing infrastructure, accommodates the high foot traffic without significant parking impact, and provides valuable benefits to the community. And with the hopefully planned improvements to the park's southern verge, the cafe will have access to ample parking as is, ensuring minimal disruption to residential areas. And approval of this application will contribute to the vibrancy and accessibility of the park and its surroundings.
Councillor Greer, do you wish to speak to this amendment?
Nothing further to add.
Okay, does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you, Ms. Amon. Just a query if subcondition 2.3 is to be deleted, that limits staff to 2 people. How many staff can there be then if that is conditions removed?
Through you, Ms. Amon, it would not provide any limits to staff members, whether they're external or they work at the house. So it would completely remove, it would effectively uncap the amount of staff to visit the site.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't support this amendment, sorry. I think that the conditions that have been proposed in relation to staff numbers are appropriate, particularly with the amendment that was made between the briefing and the meeting. That feels right to me in terms of scale for 14 people in a cafe, that to also limit the number of staff. I think what we have here is that the number of staff is intrinsically linked to the requirement for parking. We already have concessions in this development application in relation to customer parking that recognises the availability of parking in Menzies Park. We have also seen a reduction in the parking that's required to be provided since last week. So I'm really comfortable with what the officer recommendation says in relation to staff numbers and parking. And I suppose getting back to that theme of balance, I think this would tip the impact in the wrong direction. So I won't support it. I do support the final condition about the increase in number of bicycle facilities. So if that was to be presented separately, I would support that.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? I wish to make a comment. I certainly, after the briefing last week, I was concerned about a limitation, a flat limitation on 2 staff. I thought that was not particularly helpful, and I was thinking again, occupational health and safety, someone needs to go to the toilet across the road. It leaves one person there on their own. All of that's not good. One of the things I am supportive of, though, is that there is clearly an intention with these conditions to try to encourage whoever is going to be managing this cafe to also be having residents in that house. And I'm very supportive of that because it means that, firstly, you can have more than 2 staff if need be, but without adding to the overall parking burden. Because, secondly, you can access the toilet, which deals with my occupational health and safety concerns. Is it just me? I've been pregnant 3 times. So yeah, these things matter. And the other thing is, I think from a security perspective, that's actually quite important as well. If you've actually got a presence on site, and I think that's important. So I think that's an important amendment that has occurred since we were presented with the proposal last week. So thank you very much to administration for that. And finally, I would also be supportive of proposal that subcondition 6.4 be amended as it is on the paper, were that to be presented as a separate amendment. Would anyone else like to speak to the amendments as proposed on the paper? Okay, Councillor Warner, would you like to speak?
As I said at the start of this, I'll take the fact that the street tree is in the way as a win. So I'm halfway there. But still, I'd love you to all consider this. Then I would also then like to present an alternative amendment. Is that the right terminology? I don't know.
Would you like to vote on this amendment first? And if that's defeated, then move a further amendment after that? Okay, in that case, I'm going to move the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment as presented on the purple paper? Okay, all those against? Okay, that's not carried, noting that Mayor Xamon, Councillor Wallace, Councillor LaFontaine, Councillor Castle, Councillor Greer, Councillor Alexander and Councillor Wolf were opposed. Councillor Warner, did you want to offer any further amendments?
This great idea about increasing the number of on-site bicycle facilities for bikes, for e-scooters, those sorts of other alternatives to vehicle parking or traditional car parking. So on the purple paper 6.4, I think we'd just like to increase the amenity there.
Okay, so we have a mover. So Councillor Warner is moving that subcondition 6.4 be amended as follows on the paper. Is there a seconder to that? That's seconded by Councillor LaFontaine. So you have spoken on that. Councillor LaFontaine, would you like to speak on this?
Thank you, Mayor Xamon. Just that I'm definitely supportive of more bicycle facilities to be provided.
Would anyone else like to speak on this proposed amendment? Councillor Castle.
Thank you. Can I ask a question of administration, whether this is something that has been discussed with the applicant and can be accommodated?
Mayor Xamon, no, this amendment hasn't been discussed with the applicant, but it could be accommodated. There's sufficient space on site to accommodate designing 3 on-site bicycle bays, particularly given the existing 2 bays have been removed.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, I'm supportive of this. I'm just going to make another comment. Thank you to the CEO for bringing this to my attention. I may not get another opportunity to say it. So I just wanted to clarify an earlier comment I made on the substantive about this being my local cafe. I don't believe it is enough to warrant an impartiality interest, or I would have declared that in the first place. I do live several blocks away from the property, and of course we'll be deciding this matter on its planning merits. And actually, on reflection, there's probably another cafe that's closer to me than this one, but this one's down the hill, so it's a bit easier to get to. So I just wanted to make that clear. I don't believe it is an impartiality interest, but I will be on the record to say that. Thank you.
Hey, does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? I'm just going to make the point that you could still have technically just one structure if you go with the fantastic curly ones, which are really, really good for e-scooters. I do believe I've mentioned that before. Councillor, so if no one else wishes to speak, Councillor Warner, do you wish to speak on this? Okay, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Alexander, that's carried with Councillor Alexander voting against. Okay, so now we've got the amended motion in front of us. The substantive. Now we've got the substantive motion as amended in front of us. Councillor Wolf, would you like to speak? Would you like to speak on this matter in conclusion of the debate?
I think it's, thank you, Mayor. I think it's quite clear. There are lots of different views on this one that do need to be considered when we're talking about a commercial use in a residential zone. I hope that we do manage to find some balance here that is workable for the applicant, but respectful for the surrounding residents. And I thank both the applicant and the residents for working with the city through this process, and everybody here for the crash 2.5-hour course in amending motions at council.
Okay, so now I'm going to be putting the amended motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried with Councillor Alexander voting against. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next item. Oh, okay, it has been suggested that we move. I did have down to do 10.3, but instead I'm going to move to 10.1 because we've got people waiting for us to discuss this. Noting that Councillor Warner has left because she has a financial interest, and noting that a impartiality interest has been declared by 3 people who are members. Okay, so I've got 10.1 in front of us. Do I have a mover of that motion? Moved, Councillor Wolf. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Wallace. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, welcome to the club president, and we had the club first lady and another committee member, and thank you for joining us here, and to the club members who presented at the briefing last week. Just for some context, having been established in 1907, to me right now, the North Perth Bowls Club is at a really, really pivotal point in its journey towards being one of the most high-profile small bowls clubs in Perth. As we heard from the public gallery last week, the club's made absolutely enormous strides in increasing its membership. So I think we heard of increases of about 1,000 members in less than 5 years, as well as in its pennants results, and in establishing itself as just a really vibrant community hub. And all of that's really been achieved by strategic efforts and just sheer hard work by the club and its committee. As I see it now, Vincent has the opportunity to propel the club to its next level through this investment. The proposal makes sense on many, many levels, from disability access to attracting higher quality players to the club and enabling higher level professional competitions as well as community events. So something that was raised at the briefing, it also contributes to development of the broader precinct at Farmer Street, which is really coming into its own as a standalone hub of activity in North Perth. And while I admit there is certainly a certain charm to greenskeeping, I'm really, really pleased to support this proposal. And I will just finish with referencing one related matter, and thank you, administration, for the update on this one at the briefing, and that's the critical maintenance work relating to the driveway at the entrance of the club. So if we are putting forward a proposal that has huge potential in terms of attracting people to Vincent for events, and improving disability access, I think that critical maintenance of the driveway does really become important, and I'm pleased that that will be progressing.
Okay, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Zemon. Well said by Councillor Wolf. I'm very supportive of this item. Yeah, the North Perth Bowling Club's success is going through the roof. Congratulate them on that. It can take a little bit longer to get a beer at the bar these days, but that's an acceptable outcome also. So yeah, very supportive of this one. Thanks.
Would anyone else like to speak on this proposal? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zemon, and just thank you to the club for your commitment of bringing this forward with a strategic approach. It's so wonderful to hear of a club that's been thriving. I'd also like to just take a moment to appreciate the inclusion of accessibility in this proposal. So often it can be a second thought for a range of clubs, so I really appreciate that as you're growing, you've got accessibility so that it's available to everyone in our community. So thank you for that.
Would anyone else like to speak on this proposal? Councillor Alexander.
Yes, I'm clearly very supportive of the project. I think it's a good project. I just want to be on record of suggesting that there should be a sinking fund for these sorts of things so that the CSRFF fund doesn't get, in 10 years' time, asked for another contribution. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on this proposal? I'd just like to make a couple of comments. I also share Councillor Alexander's concerns about wanting to ensure that there is a sinking fund that is created to ensure that this is able to be sustainable in the long term. I think that's really important. And I also echo the comments made by Councillor Greer. I've been very impressed with the priority that has been given to ensuring that this important club is going to be accessible to people with disability. And I really I'm so pleased that it just is front of mind for people and not something which is considered to be an annoyance to have to add on. How wonderful that we are absolutely prioritising inclusivity. Okay, Councillor Wolf, is there anything that you'd like to say in conclusion?
All going well. I wish the club all the best for this venture, and I'm very excited to see how the club goes taking it to the next level and what it can give back to the community.
Okay, so I'm going to put the proposal. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Councillor Warner, you're welcome to come back into the room. She's around. Okay, so the next proposal actually requires an absolute majority. So I'm just noting that, which is one of the reasons why we've had to pull this out. I'll wait till Councillor Warner's back in the room. Thank you. Okay, so do I have a mover for 10.3, adoption of the Parking Amendment Local Law 2024, which does require, as I just said, an absolute majority. Do I have a mover for that? Moved Councillor Wallace. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Castle. Okay, Councillor Wallace, do you wish to say anything?
Not really. Some sensible amendments. Thanks for having.
Councillor Castle, do you wish to say anything? Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried by consent, by unanimously, and hence an absolute majority has been achieved. Okay, so now we're going to move to item 12.3, nomination to Urban 95 Academy 2024 program, noting that this is a late addition. Do I have a mover for this proposal? Moved Councillor Castle and seconded by Councillor Warner. Okay, so Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor. I've just brought this forward because it requires the insertion of some names. I'm just bringing it up, sorry. And also because there was an indication from council members of interest and that included 3 people. So subject to other people speaking first, I'd like to move an amendment to add a 3rd councillor.
Okay, so I'm going to let other people speak first. Councillor Warner, did you wish to speak?
Only just briefly to say this looks like a fabulous program, and thank you to Councillor Wolf for bringing it to our attention. And yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm actually going to hand over to the CEO to speak on the what would be involved with having an amendment to have 3 councillors.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, we have liaised with the organisers of the program at London School of Economics. We don't think there's any problems at all with applying with 4 members of the team. It is mainly online learning in the first instance, and if there was the site visit that's presented later on for only some selected teams who might be applying, then we can revisit the composition of the team at that time. So I don't think there's a problem at all with listing 4 members for the team at this stage of the application.
Okay, so expressions of interest from all councillors were called for. And as I understand it, 3 elected representatives have indicated an interest. Councillor Castle, do you wish to move or do you wish to insert those names?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to move an amendment to add point 3 under clause 1. And to insert the names Mayor Zaman, Councillor Wolf and Councillor Castle in clause 1, if that makes sense.
Okay, so the proposal as presented would be that council approves the following members for nomination to the Urban 95 Academy 2024 program, and that would be Mayor Zaman, Councillor Castle and Councillor Wolf, and 2 then notes that the CEO will nominate 1 suitably qualified member of staff to form part of the application. So that is the amendment which is being proposed. Do we have a seconder to that amendment? Okay, that's seconded by Councillor Wolf. Okay, so Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Just briefly, I think this is a fantastic opportunity for the city. And thank you, Councillor Wolf, for emailing it around. You beat me by about half an hour, I think, because I had just seen the post about it as well. Look, I think there's only things to gain from this program. It's got a very good reputation and has certainly got good backing from the London School of Economics and the Bernard Van Leer Foundation. There's no cost to the city, so there's really no risk involved in some council members and a staff member devoting a bit of time and effort to learning from this organisation. So, and I fully support us being able to expand the team as we've been told can be accommodated. So that's the purpose of the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Yep, so very supportive of expanding the number of people for this course. There's a quote, I don't remember the exact words, but something around designing cities for children means you're designing a better city for everybody. And I think that that's very true. Having walked around Vincent for the last 2 years with the double pram, certainly got lots of views about things that we've done really, really well for children, but lots of thought bubbles about things that could be done better. So I think this is a really good opportunity to actually put a learning framework around that. And to use the project opportunity as part of this course to actually do something that's meaningful for children in Vincent, rather than just doing a project for the sake of doing a project. So thank you to Council Deputy Mayor Georgie Carey from Mosman Park, who first posted about this opportunity and gave me lots of time in having a discussion about why it was really useful. So appreciate that.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Okay, Councillor Castle, do you want to say anything further about the amendment? Okay, in that case, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. So now I'll move back to the substantive amended motion. Would anyone like to speak to this? I'd just like to make one comment. It has been said, but I'm going to say it again. This will be no cost to the council. Ratepayers will not have to pay anything. This just means that people are volunteering their own time and energy. There is no cost to the ratepayers. Just thought I'd make that very clear. Councillor Castle, do you wish to say anything further in conclusion? I'm going to put the proposal. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so then I move on to 12.1 Governance Framework Review 2024. Okay, do we have a mover for this? Moved Councillor Wolf. Do we have a seconder? Okay, do we have a seconder? Seconder to Councillor Wallace. Councillor Wolf, you wish to speak.
Thank you. I'll be brief on this one. The updated governance framework has been presented for council adoption as a way for council members to acknowledge their responsibilities to uphold governance. But I do think there's another piece here around community engagement. So looking at the purpose of the document, the first dot point was around providing community insight into the intricacies of local government. Commend administration on compiling this really comprehensive document from so many different sources and updating that to go through the intricacies of how we work and our processes. But I think that's really, really valuable information that we could be putting out there more effectively to the community than hiding some of that information in a 50-page document. We know that for a lot of people, they don't engage in council processes until something comes up that's a stressful issue and then they have to. And at that stage, going through a 50-page document, it's probably quite stressful or not going to happen. So commending administration on putting that together, but also want to highlight opportunity to communicate that information a little bit more effectively through different media.
Councillor Wallace. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposal? Okay, I'm going to put the proposal. All those in favour? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we have no confidential items. So there being no further business to conduct, I thank all those in attendance and on the live stream and close the meeting at 8:36. You can stop the live stream. Thank you.